The first time Lieutenant Elias Rourke heard the phrase Mode 7, he was not standing in a radar room nor among naval officers in a polished briefing theater. He was barefoot, coughing blood, and sitting on the cold cement floor of a POW camp warehouse in 1972. The war had taken his ship, the USS Halcyon, 2 months earlier. A missile strike. No survivors except him. He remembered nothing of the final minutes. Only static, a burst of electrical pain, the taste of smoke in his mouth. Now he sat hunched over a tin workbench, wrists raw from rope burns repairing broken radio components under the watchful eyes of soldiers who barely knew his name. But there was one man barely older than a boy who watched him differently. A young local radar technician named Min Dewey. Dewey was quiet, meticulous, and carried himself with a heaviness too old for his age. He spoke little English, but Rourke caught enough to understand his orders. Fix this, then this, then this. He expected cruelty, contempt, or condescension. He received none of those. Instead, he found something he didn't expect: curiosity. Dewey hovered over the damaged American receivers with the fascination of someone who had spent his entire life around wires and dials, but had never touched Western technology up close. When Rourke resoldered a joint, Dewey's eyes followed the motion. When Rourke stripped insulation, Dewey nodded as if mentally recording every gesture. And then one night during a monsoon storm, everything changed. Lightning cracked above the camp. Rain hammered the tin roof so loudly that the guards huddled under tarps, barely paying attention. Rourke was alone in the warehouse, shivering when he saw Dewey slip inside. The young man shut the door behind him, pressing his back against it as if he'd been running. He carried something wrapped in cloth. Without saying a word, Dewey placed it on Rourke's workbench and unrolled it carefully. A fragment of a U.S. Navy radar module, burned, warped. Half the wires melted into black scars. Rourke felt his pulse spike. He recognized the serial plate Halcyon. Long-range radar unit 4, his ship, his station. He reached out with trembling fingers. Where did you get this?" Dewey raised one finger, then pointed toward the distant shoreline, toward where the Halcyon had gone down. He whispered, struggling with the English, "From your ship. You survive. Because of this." Rourke looked up sharply. "No, that's impossible. My radar grid collapsed before." But Dewey cut him off with surprising urgency. He grabbed a dull pencil, tore a scrap from an old maintenance ledger, and wrote 2 words. Mode 7. Rourke stared in disbelief. "There is no Mode 7, he whispered. "That pattern was experimental, dangerous. They shelved it a decade ago." Dewey shook his head violently. "You send it. That night." "What, you send Mode 7? Rourke's throat tightened. "That's impossible." The mode was locked behind restricted protocols. I couldn't have Dewey press the burned module into his hands. "I hear it," he whispered. "On radio. Different signal. Very strong. Like storm breaking. I listen every night. Never hear something like that." Rourke felt the world tilt. Mode 7 was a forbidden radar pattern, one deemed too unstable to use. It created massive energy spikes, drowned receivers in harmonic overload, and risked triggering catastrophic failures. It had been labeled restricted, too risky to use in active operations. Every officer knew that. Every technician avoided it. No one should have been able to activate it. But Dewey was trembling as he spoke, and there was no malice, no manipulation in his eyes, only fear and awe. That night, Dewey said, "Enemy aircraft come for your fleet. Big strike. Many planes. But before they arrive, your fleet turn away." Rourke's heart stuttered. "Turned away. Yes, because your signal go out. Mode 7. They receive warning. They move. Strike miss." Rourke stared at the module. His burned hands, his shaking reflection in the metal, his destroyed ship. And somewhere inside the static-filled void of his memory, something flickered. A flash of panic in the radar room. A power surge. The instrumentation screaming. The emergency override key. His palm slamming down. A burst of white noise like tearing the sky in half. Then nothing. A blackout. A wave of heat. Then waking up days later in this camp. He whispered, "I saved them." My fleet." Dewey nodded, eyes soft. "Because of Mode 7. Rourke felt the weight of those words crash against him like a collapsing wave. He hadn't known. He hadn't remembered. But somehow, even half-dead, he had accessed a mode the Navy had banned, labeled too dangerous, and buried in the footnotes of technical manuals. He had activated it anyway, and it had saved an entire fleet. Suddenly, Dewey pressed something else into his hands. A thin sheet of metal bent, scratched, and etched with a series of jagged waveforms, a handwritten note along the edge. 7. Rourke looked up at the young technician. Why? Why are you giving me this? Dewey swallowed. Because this secret is yours and mine. Rain pounded the roof. Wind howled. But for the first time in months, Rourke felt warmth bloom in his chest. A POW and a soldier of the opposing side, both trapped, both betrayed by war, both holding a scrap of burned metal containing a truth too dangerous for either military to admit. And that night, inside a warehouse lit only by lightning, Elias Rourke and Min Dewey began a quiet, fragile alliance, bound not by orders, but by a single phrase that had rewritten both their destinies, Mode 7. The monsoon storms lasted for 5 days. Rainwater seeped under the barracks walls. Men woke coughing, blankets soaked. A fever swept through the POW block, whispering between the bunks like a thief in the dark. Even the guards grew uneasy. They moved more aggressively, barked orders with less patience, and rationed food with trembling hands. But in the warehouse, among the coils, diodes, broken receivers, and stripped radar housings, there was an island of calm, because every evening when the clang of dinner buckets faded and the guards took shelter from the storm, Dewey returned. Not as captor, not as interrogator, but as something else, something neither of them had expected, an ally. He always closed the warehouse door, gently glancing back to ensure no one followed. Then he'd step toward Rourke's workbench, where the American sat repairing old field radios with hands that had learned to hide their shaking. Tonight, Dewey carried a rolled map, not military issue, thinner, almost brittle. He set it on the bench. "Your sky," he whispered. Rourke unrolled it. His breath caught. A hand-drawn map of the coastline, the vectors of his fleet, the wind patterns that night. And there, circled in charcoal, the inbound strike group. Rourke stared at it, feeling the storm inside him echo the one outside. "You knew," he whispered. "You knew they were coming for my fleet." Dewey nodded slowly. "We hear rumor, not allowed to speak." Rourke pointed at the circled pattern. "How did you know they turned away?" For a moment Dewey hesitated, but then he tapped 2 fingers against his own ear, then toward a battered shortwave receiver on the shelf behind them. "You monitored their comms," Rourke guessed. Dewey nodded. "You risked everything for this." Dewey did not answer directly. Instead, he said something Rourke had not expected. "My brother, he work radar. Good man, not soldier. They ask him to use new mode, restricted, high power, very dangerous. He say no. They force. Machine explode. He die." Rourke felt the words like a punch. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Dewey's jaw tightened. "They say, dangerous mode, always mistake, always risk, always wrong." He paused. "But your Mode 7, save people, it not mistake." The warehouse fell silent. Rain drummed on the tin roof. Somewhere in the dark, thunder rolled like artillery. Rourke finally found his voice. "I didn't try to save anyone. I was trying not to die." "No," Dewey said softly. "You send Mode 7, very strong, cut through jamming, I hear it." He pressed his palms together, fingers interlocking. "Your fleet here, they live." Rourke shook his head, overwhelmed. "If that's true, why didn't anyone else confirm it? Why didn't my Navy know?" Dewey reached behind a dismantled receiver and produced a small object, a signal analysis strip, the kind used by engineers to record unusual frequencies. He placed it gently in Rourke's hand. Dark lines, jagged, chaotic, ran across the strip. At the bottom was a faint annotation in pencil, 7 ugly pattern, overpowering, dangerous. Never allow again. Rourke felt a chill. Someone on your side tried to erase it." Dewey nodded. "Both sides fear dangerous ideas. Both sides bury things to stay safe." He tapped the strip again. "But this pattern saved fleet. You know, I know." A sudden gust rattled the warehouse windows. Rain splattered across the floor. Rourke closed his hand around the strip, a burned radar module, a hand-drawn strike map, and now a recorded strip of Mode 7's forbidden signature. 3 pieces, 3 truths, 3 secrets carried between 2 men who should never have met. "Why show me this?" Rourke finally asked. Dewey's expression softened. "Because truth heavy. One man cannot hold alone." Rourke opened his mouth to respond but froze as he noticed something else. Dewey's hands were shaking, not from fear, from decision. He was about to do something irreversible. "What is it?" Rourke whispered. Dewey took a breath, then reached under the workbench and pulled out a hidden compartment, a metal cover held in place by a rusted bolt. Inside was a small battered field radio, a model Rourke instantly recognized. U.S. military issue. His heart clenched. "That's American." "Yes," Dewey said. "Your men drop during fight, not safe to keep, but I hide." Why, Dewey tapped 2 letters scratched into the radio's case. "M7. You send Mode 7 once," he said quietly. "Maybe. You send again." Rourke stared. "You want me to warn my fleet now?" Here Dewey nodded. "If strike come again, big strike, soon." Rourke suddenly understood. Dewey wasn't helping him survive the camp. Dewey was helping him save an entire fleet again. Why risk your life for this? Dewey looked at him, eyes full of something deeper than loyalty, deeper than fear, deeper than war. "Because you saved my brother, even after he die." Rourke frowned. "What do you mean, Mode 7? Dewey whispered. "My brother say, dangerous mode always curse, always kill, but you use dangerous mode to save. You change meaning." Outside, lightning split the sky. Inside, 2 men, former enemies, sat with contraband equipment between them, their lives hanging on the thin wire of a forbidden signal. Rourke swallowed hard. "If I transmit Mode 7 again," he said, "the guards will kill me, maybe kill you too." Dewey nodded slowly. "But fleet live." Rourke looked at the radio, looked at the burned radar fragment, looked at Dewey, then whispered, "Show me the antenna." The rain had not stopped for 2 days. The camp had transformed into a labyrinth of mud, waterlogged paths, and flickering lamps. The guards were exhausted, tense, and irritable. Storms always made them nervous. Storms carried aircraft, and aircraft carried fear. Inside the warehouse, Elias Rourke sat hunched over the battered American field radio Min Dewey had hidden. The metal was scarred, dented, and pitted with rust, but the internals, shockingly, were mostly intact. Dewey knelt beside him, holding a soldering iron over a small alcohol flame. The storm had knocked out power to half the camp, but the warehouse still had enough electricity to work with barely. Rourke whispered, "If the guards see a live circuit, we're finished." Dewey whispered back, "They hide. Storm too big. Lightning scare them more than you." A faint smile tugged at Rourke's lips. He had not smiled in months. But tonight was different. Tonight he felt something alive inside him again, something that war had tried very hard to kill. Purpose. He examined the radio's frequency dial. Mode 6 was labeled. Mode 5 too. Mode 4 had a red scratch across it, likely from combat damage. Mode 7 had no label. Only a faint indentation, as though someone had once carved something there, but the mark had faded with time wear and fire. "This radio never had Mode 7, Rourke whispered. "It isn't built for it." Dewey nodded. "True, but your radar module?" "It have pattern. I save signature." He tapped the burned American module, the one he had brought that first night. "You know this pattern in your head," Dewey said softly. "I see how you look at it." Rourke swallowed. He did know it, not consciously. The memory of that night remained fractured, burned by shock and concussion, but something deep inside his reflexes remembered the way his fingers had moved across the console, remembered the panic, remembered the override, remembered a burst of static that had felt like ripping the sky open. He placed a hand over the radio. "Help me align the coils," he murmured. Dewey nodded and began unpacking scavenged components, bits of broken receivers, burned transistors, sections of copper wire stripped from discarded generators. Piece by piece they rebuilt the radio rerouting circuits, splicing wires, loading a crude version of the forbidden pattern into the device. Thunder shook the roof. A guard shouted something outside, then silence again. Dewey angled the antenna toward a gap in the roof. Rain cascaded down it like silver threads. "This is only way out," he whispered. "Radio cannot transmit far in storm." "But Mode 7 strong. It pushed through. Rourke nodded. He adjusted the cracked tuning dial with trembling fingers. Help me calculate the harmonic burst window. Dewey scribbled numbers on a scrap of paper. His handwriting was sharp, angular, precise, like the man himself. Storm create noise, he explained, but noise also cover us. Guard cannot hear special transmission. It's camouflage, Rourke said quietly. Dewey nodded. Yes. Nature hide your signal. Rourke's throat tightened. 2 enemies. In a storm. Hunched over a stolen radio they should never have touched. Working together to save a fleet that only one of them belonged to. He whispered, "Why are you not afraid?" Dewey paused. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face. "I am afraid," he said, "every second. But fear make men cruel. Or brave. I choose second." Rourke felt a pressure behind his eyes, something close to grief. Or gratitude. It was hard to tell the difference anymore. He turned back to the radio. "Let's begin." The first test failed. The second produced only static. The third collapsed the circuit, entirely forcing them to rebuild one of the boards. Hours passed. The storm raged. The guards remained hidden in their barracks. Rourke felt dizziness washing over him. Malnutrition, fever, and exhaustion gnawed at his limbs. Dewey noticed. "You need rest," he whispered. Rourke shook his head. "If a strike is coming tonight, we can't wait." Dewey hesitated. "My people will attack big convoy. Maybe tonight. I hear rumor." Rourke's heart clenched. "What convoy? Hospital ships, transport carriers, many sailors. If they hit, many die." Rourke's breath came shallow. "And my fleet. Escort them. Protect them." Rourke closed his eyes. He pictured the Halcyon. He pictured the men lost. He pictured the fleet that had turned away because of his forbidden signal. If Mode 7 had worked once, it could work again. And if it didn't, he and Dewey would die. The convoy would die. The war would claim more souls. He took a deep breath. "Help me stabilize the induction coil." Dewey nodded, and together they tried again. It came together quietly. No surge, no spark, no blown fuse. Just a light, a faint orange glow across the radio's internal filament. Rourke stared at it, stunned. "We have power." Dewey let out a breath he had been holding. "Now we need pattern." Rourke's fingers hovered over the tuning dial. He didn't remember Mode 7 in words. He remembered it in motion, in instinct, in fear. He closed his eyes and let the memory guide him. The memory of a radar room filled with smoke. The memory of alarms blaring. The memory of knowing the fleet had only seconds. The memory of reaching for the forbidden override. The memory of pressing it. The memory of everything going white. His fingers twisted the dial. A soft harmonic whine filled the warehouse. The lights flickered. The burned module on the table vibrated faintly as though resonating with something it recognized. Dewey whispered, "That is it. That is Mode 7. The harmonic grew. Rourke grabbed the antenna and turned it toward the storm. "Now," Dewey asked. "Almost," Rourke said. "We need the noise floor to peak." Thunder rolled overhead. Wind slammed against the walls. The warehouse shook. Rourke felt a pulse inside the radio like a heartbeat. The storm reached its peak. "Now," Rourke shouted. Dewey flipped the final switch. The radio screamed. Not a signal audible to humans, but a deep, piercing burst that tore through interference, through rain, through cloud, through every layer of atmospheric chaos. The warehouse lights died. The harmonic collapsed. Smoke rose from the antenna wire. Both men gasped. "It's done," Rourke whispered. Dewey stared at him, eyes wide. Did they hear? Did Fleet receive? Rourke didn't know. He could only hope. For long minutes neither spoke. Then a distant rumble. Not thunder, not artillery. Aircraft, a formation of them. Dewey froze. "They come," he whispered. "Strike group. Many planes." Rourke felt cold dread. "If they saw my signal." "They change path," Dewey said suddenly. "Listen." The aircraft roared overhead, then veered. Not toward the sea, not toward the convoy, but inland. Away, away. Rourke's breath caught. "They saw it," he whispered. "They see Mode 7," Dewey corrected. Rourke felt a wave of relief so powerful he nearly collapsed, but then voices. Boots, shouts, clattering metal. The guards. They had heard something. Someone pounded on the warehouse door. "Open up." Dewey's face drained of color. He whispered, "Hide radio. Now." Rourke helped him shove the radio under a pile of scrap metal just as the door burst open. 2 guards stormed in, rifles raised. "What are you doing here?" one snarled. Dewey stepped forward, shielding Rourke with his body in an almost imperceptible motion. Checking equipment, he said calmly, "Storm damage. Commander orders." The guards scanned the room. Their eyes lingered on the antenna wire still smoking. Rourke kept his head bowed. One guard barked, "Storm makes strange noises. Commander angry. Wants inspection of all warehouses." Dewey bowed. "Of course." The guards left. The moment the door shut, Dewey collapsed against a shelf, trembling. "We need hide better," he whispered. "They suspect." Rourke nodded. "But the signal, it worked. The fleet is safe." Dewey looked up, eyes shining with something like pride. "A dangerous mode," he said softly, "labeled too risky. And yet, it saved them." Rourke placed a hand over his heart. "It saved them because of you." Dewey shook his head. "No, because of us." Outside, the storm began to ease. Inside the warehouse, 2 enemies turned allies stared at the faint glow of the burned radar module. Mode 7 had returned, and it had saved a fleet. But this time the cost was only beginning. The war ended before anyone in the POW camp realized it. No grand announcement, no sirens, no flags rising in the dawn. Just a subtle shift, the way the guards stopped shouting, the way their boots dragged with confusion, the way their eyes flicked nervously toward the distant road as if expecting news that refused to arrive. Then, one morning, the gates of the camp stood open. No one had opened them. No one was guarding them. The storm had broken in more ways than one. Prisoners stumbled forward, unsure if this was a trick, unsure if stepping past the gate meant surviving or dying. The guards were gathered near the motor pool, arguing in hushed, frantic tones. Some were crying. Others were abandoning uniforms. Rourke stood among the dazed prisoners, clutching the inside pocket of his tattered shirt. Inside it lay the burned radar module, the frequency strip, and the tiny American field radio with its hacked Mode 7 circuitry. All wrapped in cloth Dewey had sewn from an old rice sack. He turned, scanning the crowd. Where was Dewey? The young technician had been by his side every evening for weeks, guiding him through fear storm and static. But now, when the gates were open and the camp's power had dissolved into chaos, he was nowhere to be found. Dewey Rourke called. No answer. He pushed through the crowd, past gaunt prisoners, past bewildered guards, shedding insignias, past abandoned crates and broken bayonets. He reached the warehouse. The door hung open. Inside was silence. The workbench stood empty. The coils, the solder, the makeshift antenna, gone. All that remained was the imprint of 2 men's shadows on the dusty floor, one tall and thin, one smaller, round-shouldered from carrying too much fear. Rourke's throat tightened. Had the guards turned on him? Had he fled? Had he been taken? Had he paid the price for their transmission? He called again. Dewey, still nothing. Rain began to fall, soft, hesitant drops. Not a storm. A cleansing. A guard approached from behind, not with rage or threat, but with hands raised in surrender. "You go," the guard murmured in broken English. "War over. You free." Rourke stared at him blankly. The guard swallowed. "No hurt. Go home." Home. The word felt foreign. Home was an ocean away. Home was a memory blurred by hunger and rain. Home was a fleet that might still be alive because of a forbidden signal sent from the heart of the enemy's camp. Rourke stepped toward the gate, but turned one last time. "Dewey," he whispered. Thunder rolled far out at sea, as if answering him across time. Elias Rourke was not a man of ceremony. He had returned to service after his recovery, though not to combat. He worked instead in technical analysis, the place the Navy placed those who understood machinery better than politics. He spent years reviewing radar logs, teaching young sailors what interference hums meant, and sitting in quiet rooms where men discussed modes, frequencies, calibrations, warnings. Mode 7 had never been mentioned. Not once. If the fleet had received his storm-born signal that night, it had never been acknowledged. The official report of the Halcyon said the ship was lost in an engagement. No extraordinary measures noted. It didn't matter. Rourke knew what he had done, what they had done. He kept the burned module locked inside a metal box, the radio too, and the frequency strip, 3 pieces of a truth no one had asked for. And beside them, folded and fading with time, was the scrap of paper with Dewey's handwriting, Mode 7. Sometimes Rourke would open the box at night, touch the items, and imagine the young technician standing beside him again, whispering calculations under a flickering oil lamp. But he never found Dewey. Every inquiry vanished into bureaucratic fog, records lost, names misspelled, time eroded everything. Or so he thought. It came in an unmarked envelope, no return address, no insignia, just his name written in careful English. Inside was a short letter. If you still carry the burned metal, come to Da Nang. The one who saved your fleet lives in shadows but waits for peace to speak. Rourke sat stunned, the room spinning slightly. He read the letter again. He packed only what he needed. The box, a single change of clothes, a heart full of questions. Within a week he landed in Vietnam. No uniform, no rank, just a man returning to a place where the rain once carried secrets. The address in the letter led him to a quiet fishing village. The air smelled of salt-grilled fish and engine oil. Children chased dogs through sandy streets. An old man waited near a broken pier. Thin, stooped, hands scarred from decades of solder burns. Rourke felt his breath catch. Dewey. The old man turned. His eyes, once sharp with fear and hope, were older now, softened by time, but instantly recognizable. He whispered the name as if tasting a memory. Elias. Rourke stepped forward, stunned. You're alive. Dewey smiled faintly. Storm did not take me. Rourke wanted to embrace him, but hesitation held him. They stood like two ghosts, unsure if they were meant to touch the living world again. Finally, Dewey gestured to a crate near the pier. Sit. You came far. We talk. Rourke sat. The sea murmured beneath them. Dewey spoke first. You wonder why I disappear? Rourke nodded. Dewey looked toward the horizon. After we send Mode 7, Commander suspect sabotage. He punish many. They search for traitor. I hide. Then war end. But I afraid. I run. Rourke swallowed. You saved me, he whispered. You saved a convoy. You saved the fleet. Uday raised a hand gently. No, he said. We save. Not I. Not you. We. He pointed to the box Rourke carried. You still have it, Dewey said softly. Rourke nodded. All of it. He opened the box. Inside lay the burned radar module, the frequency strip, the old field radio with its rewired heart, and the scrap of paper that said Mode 7. Dewey reached out, fingertips trembling, and touched the burned module as if touching a fallen friend. I keep part 2, he said, and withdrew a small pouch from his own coat. Inside was the counterpart piece of the Halcyon's radar module, also burned, also warped, also a fragment of the night fate carved a new path. Rourke's voice cracked. You kept it. Dewey nodded. Memory heavy. But heavy things remind us not forget. They sat in silence. The sea wind grew gentler. A fishing boat creaked against the pier. Finally Rourke spoke. Why call me here? Why now? Dewey closed his eyes. Because story should not die with us. Mode 7? People fear it. Say too dangerous, too unstable, too risky. Same as people fear men from other side. He opened his eyes again. But dangerous things sometimes save. Rourke felt the words settle deep in him. And you want the world to know? He asked quietly. Dewey shook his head. No, only you. Rourke blinked. Me? Yes, Dewey said gently. Because you live with truth. You carry memory. And because I want to forgive myself. Rourke's voice softened. For what? For surviving, Dewey whispered, when others did not. Rourke felt something inside him break loose. He reached across the crate and placed his hand over Dewey's. I carried that same guilt, he said, for decades, but we survived for a reason. He lifted the burned radar module. This reason, Dewey nodded slowly, tears gathering in the corners of his eyes. Rourke continued, voice trembling, "A mode too dangerous to use, but used anyway by two men who wanted to stop death, not cause it." Dewey smiled weakly. "Then we do one more dangerous thing." He reached into the box and took both pieces of the radar module, the one he had kept, the one Rourke kept. He pressed them together. They fit imperfectly, brokenly, but unmistakably from the same machine, the same night, the same impossible miracle. "These pieces," Dewey said, "won't be whole again." Rourke swallowed hard. "What should we do with them?" Dewey looked out at the sea. "Return them," he said softly, "to water that witnessed truth." Rourke hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Yes. Symbol heavy. Sea carry better than men." Rourke stood. His legs shook not from age but from emotion. Dewey stood with him. They walked to the edge of the pier. Rourke held one fragment. Dewey held the other. A wind blew gently, lifting the scent of salt and memory. Rourke whispered, "On that night, a restricted radar mode saved a fleet." Dewey nodded. "Because two men did not let fear choose. They brought the pieces together, fitting broken edges against broken edges, forming one whole truth. Then together they released it into the sea. The fragments sank slowly, glinting once beneath the water's surface before descending into the quiet deep. Two men watched in silence, not as prisoner and guard, not as enemies, not even as veterans of opposing sides, but as survivors of the same storm." Dewey turned to him. "Now truth-free." Rourke placed a hand on Dewey's shoulder. "No," he said softly, "now we are." For the first time in decades, Rourke felt the war loosen its grip on his chest. The sea healed the rest.